Hi, I'm Leif Nelson, doctoral candidate in the Department of Educational Technology at Boise State University. My study is called Ideological Misalignment in the Discourses of Higher Education, comparing university mission statements with text from commercial learning analytics providers. It's kind of a mouthful, but in this video I will elaborate the background, problem, and significance of this study, the research questions and methodology I used, relevant literature that informs and provides context for the study, my findings, and my interpretation, and some recommendations from the analysis. First, some background. Universities have been around for a very long time. In the United States, universities have evolved over time, reflecting changes and the influences of industrialists, cultural revolutions, scientific advancements, even wars, the military, and of course the government. Through all of this, certain ideological values have persisted as defining characteristics of public American universities. Today, these values are represented in the mission statements that are presented on university websites. They promote things like freedom, creativity, the dissemination of knowledge, and the well-being of all people everywhere. Meanwhile, education research in the last century has been dominated by scientific experimentation, or what is called positivism. Today, the unprecedented ubiquity of online content, mobile devices, and the Internet of Things are causing these discourses of technology and education to intermingle in new ways. Private companies, especially, are trying to capitalize on the new types of data that are available in online applications. It is important for education researchers and practitioners alike to apply a critical lens to these issues. First, let's clarify some terms and concepts. I mentioned the term ideology. What I mean by ideology is the beliefs, concepts, and norms that underlie or are taken as a given in social groups and their activities. Related to ideology is the concept of discourse. Discourse is how ideologies and practices are represented or signified through various forms of communication. Another way to think of it is that discourse is any form of social language. My research question is what ideological assumptions about the purpose of education are advanced by the discourses of American universities as compared with those of commercial learning analytics providers. This research is grounded in critical theory. Critical theory was developed by sociology researchers in the 1930s Germany, and it looks at how societies are made up of ideological and historical factors. Critical theory asserts that there are often ideological differences and power struggles between different social groups. It had a direct influence on the methodology I used in this study, which is called critical discourse analysis. Critical discourse analysis looks at social language that is spoken, written, or expressed through things like gestures and pictures. In my case, I'm primarily analyzing written texts, though some visual and formal elements like pictures and page design are included in the analysis. Specifically, I combine the methodologies proposed by Norman Fairclough and James Paul Gee. Fairclough talks about three phases of analysis that take place in a critical discourse analysis. They are the microanalysis or descriptive phase, the mesoanalysis or interpretation, and the macroanalysis or explanation. Gee identifies 7 building tasks that are used to linguistically and symbolically construct our social reality. I incorporated each of Gee's 7 building tasks into each of the phases. In the microanalysis, signs and significance are discovered through word frequency analysis and by analyzing things like jargon words and the use of modifiers to emphasize certain terms and concepts. In the mesoanalysis, activities, identities, and relationships are shown through the relationships between subjects and verbs and between actors and objects. In the macroanalysis, politics and connections, for example, connections to other discourses, are uncovered by drawing conclusions from the earlier phases and looking for cues in the language that might tip off the reader that there are underlying motivations or agendas behind or beneath the text and the producers. Put another way, The microanalysis is concerned with the what, the mesoanalysis looks at the how, and the macroanalysis asks why. To provide background and context for the two genres of higher education missions and commercial learning analytics providers, my literature review provided a background on the history of American higher education and on the disciplinary underpinnings of contemporary learning analytics. The story of American business and industry appears in both of these literature strands. From its colonial origins, American higher education has been influenced by British universities like Oxford and Cambridge, and by industry magnates who founded and funded marquee research institutions like Stanford, Johns Hopkins, and the University of Chicago. Industrial practices like Taylorism and Fordism emerged alongside new forms of assessment and accountability in higher education, while around the same time, many new students were enrolling at universities representing new demographics like women and the working class, and later people of color. The emergence of new measurement practices related to standardized testing and accreditation in the early part of the 20th century coincided with the application of scientific experimentation on human subjects to better understand, explain, and even predict behavioral phenomena like learning. The literature review explores the origins of things like programmed instruction and teaching machines, and it shows the connections between these early behaviorist inventions and their influence on the learning analytics research being carried out today. Learning analytics is a contemporary field of study, and the term can also refer to the data or systems themselves. In either case, it is focused on collecting, measuring, and analyzing educational data for the purpose of improving educational context and learner behavior. It's still an emerging field and an ambiguous one. The people who helped popularize the term learning analytics, folks like George Siemens, who's also associated with other made-up edtech terms like MOOCs and connectivism, did so by creating a corresponding conference, Learning Analytics and Knowledge, a professional organization, the Society of Learning Analytics Research, and a journal, the Journal of Learning Analytics, all at the same time in 2011. And thus, learning analytics was officially born in the collective imagination of educators and education researchers. The theories behind learning analytics exist on a family tree with ancestors in the psychological theories of behaviorism and cognitivism, as well as computer science research in artificial intelligence. And it has siblings in the adjacent fields of educational data mining, adaptive learning, and the business field of business intelligence. The popular phrase big data has also been used by companies like IBM to describe corporate strategies to predict and suggest, persuade and manipulate large numbers of people based on large sets of their activity data. Despite the kinds of ethical concerns that big data and education might present, when this study was being carried out, there was very little research that asked big questions about whether learning analytics was even appropriate in education, what it meant in the context of sociological views about education, and how the kinds of predictive strategies being carried out at actual institutions might in fact be dehumanizing or even harmful. A few rare exceptions within the learning analytics research in articles from people like Scholes and Williamson, for examples, raise these questions, while the majority of ethical concerns discussed by learning analytics researchers had to do with practical concerns like there ought to be well-defined policies about protecting data, or to more blatant biased sentiments like we have an ethical imperative to do more learning analytics research and projects because they will help improve learning. Others like Shoshana Zuboff criticize the use of big data in society in general because it represents new forms of extraction and exploitation. So what texts might represent different ideologies in education? I used a purposeful criterion sampling process to identify the texts used in my study. Each organization selected is recognized as having cultural and social capital and significance. In the case of universities, I chose public institutions that have been longtime members of the Association of American Universities. In my literature review, I talk about the AAU, how it was formed, and why it is significant. I also selected universities that are land grants and that are research universities, modeled after the German Humboldtian structure. Each of these characteristics connects these institutions to the history of American public higher education and its corresponding ideologies. The University of Texas at Austin has the largest endowment of any public university in the United States. Michigan State University was the prototypical land-grant university established prior to and serving as a model for the Morrill Act of 1862.
The University of Oregon
provided a good setting for this analysis as it provided additional information about how their mission statement was developed. With the commercial learning analytics providers, each text refers to providing services and benefits for higher education, and they each also have social and cultural capital and recognition as found in both the research literature about learning analytics, but also in search engine results and online publications. IBM is a very large, old, and multifaceted company. It has been involved in education research for many decades, and the company has been a major force in the birth, evolution, and popularity of artificial intelligence research and application. Pearson is the largest education company in the world, as it primarily offers textbooks, software applications, and services for mostly education clients. Lastly, Newton, a more recent technology startup, has received much media attention for bold claims about affecting student performance. These commercial providers are also connected to each other because Newton previously provided data processing tools for Pearson, but was later replaced by IBM. The analysis involved a variety of techniques and activities. The order is roughly chronological, although every step was revisited and reiterated multiple times throughout the analysis process. Color coding parts of speech, nouns, verbs, modifiers, then listing those words in a separate table. Pasting text from each genre, university mission statements and commercial learning analytics providers, side by side to make it apparent the similarities, differences, contradictions, and contrasts between the two. The same thing was done with images, screenshots, and word clouds from each genre, though most of these were not included in the final analysis. These side-by-side comparisons supported the immanent critique aspect of the research with the goal of exposing contradictions and ideological differences. Generating word frequency tables to show emphasis, repetition, and themes. Discovering grammatical and rhetorical techniques such as transitivity, nominalization, and presupposition. Identifying common themes and patterns among texts in the same genre. Writing short notes of themes and codes in the margins of these documents and translating them to post-it notes. The post-it notes were sorted and rearranged through various iterations. The major findings were: universities have limitless scope, while learning is to be measured and improved. Universities are exceptional. Data and technology systems are inevitable and essential. Universities are inclusive communities. Individualism is important in the texts of commercial learning analytics providers. Universities benefit everyone, while data and technology systems optimize learning efficiency. Universities are a public good. Technology companies support the private economic benefits of individuals and for themselves. Universities are connected to the history of American higher education, and technology companies are connected to the discourses of behaviorism and artificial intelligence. In Chapter 5, the analysis and discussion, I attempt to further interpret and explain why these differences exist and what may be problematic about them. To do this, I revisit some of the topics from the literature review related to the parallel histories of American higher education and the positivist research traditions that underpin contemporary learning analytics. Going beyond these related but distinct histories, I postulate that we are now in an era of neo-Fordism that is characterized by the routinized methods for maximum productivity and efficiency associated with Ford Motor Company's automobile plants at the height of modernity. But neo-Fordism adds to these new dimensions afforded by massive network technology systems.
In Neo-Fordism,
There is this endless drive for measurable progress and improvement. Relationships are transactional and transitory and exist only in the pursuit of some external goal or productive output, often monetary. Further, the systems in which our activities are carried out regard individuality only insofar as individuals are resources that can be manipulated, even deconstructed and quantified. The source of power is concentrated among a small group, while the execution of systems and processes are automated and self-improved, thus reducing the degrees to which humans can be held accountable for any consequences. Even in economic terms, outsourcing the decisions and practices of what should be very local and very personal activities like teaching and learning to large corporations with unprecedented wealth leads to a reduction in opportunities for local experts to regain any freedom or agency. Where public universities have always been sites that promote the public good, the advancement of knowledge, and even more abstract values like freedom and democracy, it's imperative that today, perhaps more than ever, they refocus their efforts and resources on critical research about education and technology. Education, especially public higher education, is so much more than training and performance. There should be more diversity in both the people who are studying things like artificial intelligence, but also in the curriculum that's required in university programs. Universities can work with commercial providers to create a new paradigm that prioritizes the well-being of all people
and be better aligned with the mission and purpose of public higher education.